The mansion on Riverside Drive stood silent under the full moon. Inside, Margaret Hayes lay in her bed, eyes wide with terror as shadows danced across her ceiling. The air turned cold. A figure materialized at the foot of her bed, a young woman in a housekeeping uniform, her eyes glowing with otherworldly light. "You took everything from me," the spirit whispered. "Now I'm taking everything from you." Margaret tried to scream, but no sound came. The figure moved closer, and Margaret felt her heart seize with the same hunger, the same cold, the same fear she had inflicted on an innocent soul. By morning, she would be dead. But this story began 6 months earlier. If you're enjoying this story, please like this video and subscribe for more chilling tales. Drop a comment below with your thoughts. Elena Martinez stood at the iron gates of the Hayes estate, her single suitcase clutched in trembling hands. At 19, she had nothing, no parents, no money, no home. The car accident that took her family had left her completely alone in the world. The 3-story mansion before her looked like something from a magazine. White columns framed the entrance, and perfectly manicured gardens stretched as far as she could see. This was Riverside, the wealthiest neighborhood in the city, where tech executives and old money families lived behind high walls and security cameras. "You must be the new housekeeper," a cold voice said. Elena turned to see Margaret Hayes standing in the doorway. The woman was in her 50s, dressed in an expensive silk blouse and designer slacks. Her blonde hair was pulled back severely, and her lips pressed into a thin line. Everything about her screamed wealth and control. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Elena Martinez. Thank you for giving me this opportunity." Margaret's eyes swept over Elena with obvious disdain. "You're younger than I expected. Can you handle hard work?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm a hard worker. I promise. We'll see about that. Your room is in the basement. Breakfast is at 6. You'll cook, clean, do laundry, and maintain the grounds. Your pay is $200 a week, room and board included. Any questions?" Elena swallowed hard. $200 a week was barely anything, but she had no other options. "No, ma'am." "Good. Follow me." The basement room was tiny, barely large enough for the narrow bed and small dresser crammed inside. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling. The concrete walls were unpainted and cold. There was no window. "This is where you'll sleep," Margaret said. "Don't come upstairs after 9 p.m. unless I call for you. And don't touch anything that doesn't concern your work." After Margaret left, Elena sat on the thin mattress and let the tears come. This wasn't what she'd hoped for, but it was shelter. It was survival. She unpacked her few belongings, some clothes, a photo of her parents, and the silver cross her mother had given her. She kissed the photo and whispered, "I'll make you proud. I'll survive this." That night, Elena lay awake listening to the house settle around her. Footsteps echoed on the floor above. Doors opened and closed. She heard Margaret's sharp voice giving orders to someone, probably her adult son who lived on the second floor. Elena didn't know it yet, but this house would become her prison. The woman upstairs would test every ounce of her strength and spirit. And before it was over, one of them would be dead. As exhaustion finally claimed her, Elena dreamed of her mother's warm kitchen, filled with the smell of fresh tortillas and the sound of laughter. She dreamed of safety and love, things that would soon seem like distant memories from another lifetime. The clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m. In 7 hours, her new life would begin. In 6 months, someone would die in this house. The mansion held its breath, waiting. The alarm screamed at 5 a.m. Elena jolted awake, disoriented in the dark basement room. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then reality crashed back. The accident, her losses, this cold mansion. She dressed quickly in the plain uniform Margaret had left on her dresser, a gray dress with a white apron. Looking in the cracked mirror, she barely recognized herself. The girl staring back looked small and frightened. The kitchen was massive, all marble countertops and stainless steel appliances. Elena had cooked for her family, but never in a space like this. She found eggs, bacon, fresh fruit, and expensive coffee beans. At exactly 6 a.m., Margaret appeared in the doorway. "Is breakfast ready?" "Almost, ma'am. Just plating it now." Elena carefully arranged the eggs, bacon, and fruit on fine china. Her hands shook as she carried the plate to the dining room, terrified of dropping something. Margaret cut into the eggs. "They're overcooked." "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'll do better. Stop apologizing and learn to cook properly." Margaret pushed the plate away. "Make again. And this time, don't waste my food." Elena returned to the kitchen, fighting back tears. She cooked another batch, checking the eggs constantly. This time, Margaret ate in silence, which Elena learned was the closest thing to approval she would receive. After breakfast came the real work. Clean all 5 bathrooms. Scrub the floors. Do the laundry, and, I mean all of it. Water the garden. Polish the silver. Vacuum every room. I want this house spotless by 6 p.m. Elena stared at the list Margaret handed her. It was impossible to finish in 12 hours. Well, get started. The day blurred into exhaustion. The bathrooms alone took 3 hours. The marble floors of the main level seemed to stretch forever. The garden in the summer heat left her dizzy and sunburned. The laundry room filled with mountains of expensive clothes, each piece requiring special care. By noon, Elena was starving. She'd had no breakfast, working through the meal service. She found some leftover bread in the kitchen and quickly ate a slice. "What are you doing?" Elena spun around. Margaret stood in the doorway, her face twisted with anger. I was hungry, ma'am. That bread is for the family, not the help. Your meals are at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. If you can't wait, that's your problem." "I'm sorry. I didn't know. There's a lot you don't know. You'll learn, or you'll leave." Margaret turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the marble. Elena's stomach growled, but she returned to work. She scrubbed floors until her knees ached. She carried baskets of laundry up and down the stairs until her arms burned. She polished silver until her reflection stared back from every spoon and platter. At 4 p.m., Margaret's son came home. Daniel Hayes was 32, overweight, and lazy. He tracked mud through the freshly cleaned hallway without a glance at Elena scrubbing on her hands and knees. "Mother, where's my lunch? The new girl will make it," Margaret called from upstairs. Elena ran to the kitchen and made a sandwich, though she'd never been told what Daniel liked. She brought it to him in the living room where he sprawled on the leather sofa, scrolling through his phone. "What is this?" He held up the sandwich with disgust. "I don't eat turkey." "I'm sorry, sir. What would you like? Figure it out. That's what we pay you for." She made a roast beef sandwich. He ate it without thanks or acknowledgement. Dropping crumbs on the floor, she just vacuumed. By 6 p.m., Elena had finished most of the list, but not everything. Margaret inspected the house with eagle eyes, finding every speck of dust, every streak on a window. "This is unacceptable. You'll stay until it's done properly." "Yes, ma'am." Elena worked until 10 p.m., her body screaming for rest. Finally, Margaret dismissed her with a wave of her hand. In the kitchen, Elena found a small plate of food left for her, cold rice and vegetables. She ate standing up, too tired to sit. Then she stumbled to her basement room and collapsed on the bed. Every muscle ached. Her hands were raw from chemicals and scrubbing. But she'd survived day 1. As sleep took her, Elena thought of her mother's words. "Mija, you are stronger than you know. When life pushes you down, you get back up." "I'll get back up," Elena whispered into the darkness. "I have to." Above her, the house settled into silence. Margaret Hayes slept soundly in her king-sized bed, never thinking about the exhausted girl in the basement. Not yet. 2 months passed. Each day was the same. Endless work, harsh criticism, and barely enough food to survive. Elena grew thinner. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her uniforms hung loose on her shrinking frame. Margaret found new reasons to criticize every day. The water was too cold. The towels weren't folded correctly. The garden had a single weed. Nothing Elena did was ever good enough. "You're worthless," Margaret would say. "I should have hired someone competent." The other staff members, a part-time gardener and a weekly cleaning crew, saw how Margaret treated Elena, but they said nothing. Everyone needed their jobs, and Margaret had power in this city. Cross her, and you'd never work in Riverside again. One morning, Elena woke up feeling dizzy. She hadn't eaten properly in days. Margaret had started reducing her meal portions as punishment for minor mistakes. "You broke a glass yesterday," Margaret had said. "No dinner tonight." Elena pulled herself upstairs to start breakfast, gripping the railing to stay upright. In the kitchen, she cracked eggs into a bowl, but her hands trembled so badly she dropped one. It splattered across the pristine marble floor. "No, no, no," Elena whispered, dropping to her knees to clean it up. "What was that noise?" Margaret appeared, still in her silk robe, her face already twisted with anger. "I dropped an egg, ma'am. I'm cleaning it up right now." "You clumsy girl. Do you know how much those organic eggs cost?" "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm not feeling well today." "Not feeling well?" Margaret's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Poor little Elena isn't feeling well. Should I call you a doctor? Give you a spa day?" "No, ma'am. I just need to eat something." "You'll eat when I say you can eat. Right now, you'll clean up this mess and cook breakfast properly. And there will be no meals for you today. Maybe hunger will teach you to be more careful." Elena's vision blurred with tears, but she nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She cleaned the floor and cooked breakfast with shaking hands. Margaret and Daniel ate while Elena stood in the corner, watching food she'd prepared disappear into their mouths. Her stomach cramped with hunger. After they finished, Elena began her daily tasks. But 3 hours later, while carrying a heavy basket of wet laundry up from the basement, her legs gave out. She tumbled backward down the concrete stairs. Pain exploded through her body as she hit each step. The basket flew from her hands, clothes scattering everywhere. Elena lay at the bottom of the stairs, her ankle twisted at a wrong angle, her head throbbing. "Help!" she called weakly. "Please." Minutes passed. No one came. Finally, Elena heard footsteps above. "What's all this noise?" Margaret appeared at the top of the stairs, looking down at Elena's crumpled form. "Get up. You're making a mess." "I can't, ma'am. My ankle. I think it's broken." Margaret descended the stairs slowly, stepping over the scattered laundry. She looked at Elena's swollen ankle with cold eyes. "It's probably just twisted. Walk it off." "Ma'am, please. I need a doctor. What you need is to stop being dramatic. Get up and get back to work." "I can't stand." "Then crawl." Margaret turned and walked back upstairs. Elena lay there in shock. The pain in her ankle was excruciating, but worse was the realization that Margaret truly didn't care if she lived or died. Using the railing, Elena pulled herself upright, keeping weight off her injured foot. She hopped and limped, gathering the fallen laundry, tears streaming down her face. It took her an hour to get back upstairs. Her ankle had swollen to twice its normal size, turning purple and black. But she kept working. She had no choice. That night, alone in her basement room, Elena wrapped her ankle in an old t-shirt and elevated it on her pillow. She stared at the ceiling, wondering how much more she could take. On the small table beside her bed sat the photo of her parents, smiling in happier times. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered to them. "I don't know how much more I can survive." The house groaned around her, old pipes settling, floorboards creaking. Elena didn't know it, but her suffering was being recorded. Not by cameras or witnesses, but by something older, something that remembered every injustice, every cruelty, every moment of pain. The house itself was watching, and it was keeping score. 3 months into her employment, Elena had become a ghost of herself. Her cheeks were hollow, her eyes dull. The ankle injury had never properly healed because she couldn't rest it. She limped through her daily tasks, pushing through constant pain. Margaret seemed to feed on Elena's suffering. The crueler she became, the more satisfied she appeared. One Saturday afternoon, Margaret was hosting a garden party for her wealthy friends, the wives of tech CEOs, real estate developers, and city council members. She'd spent days planning the perfect event to show off her status. "Everything must be flawless," Margaret told Elena that morning. "These are important people. If you embarrass me, you'll regret it." Elena prepared elaborate finger sandwiches, expensive cheeses, fresh fruit displays, and delicate pastries. She set up tables in the garden with white tablecloths and fresh flower centerpieces. She polished the good china until it gleamed. By noon, 12 wealthy women sat in the garden, sipping champagne and gossiping. Elena served them with quiet efficiency, trying to be invisible. "Margaret, your home is absolutely stunning," one woman said. "Thank you, Patricia. I do work hard to maintain standards." Elena bit her tongue. Margaret didn't lift a finger to maintain anything. "And who is this?" another woman asked, gesturing at Elena. "Oh, just the housekeeper. She's adequate, though barely." The women laughed. Elena's face burned with shame, but she said nothing. She returned to the kitchen to prepare the next course. Margaret's prized crystal glasses filled with imported sparkling water and fresh berries. She arranged 12 glasses on a silver tray, each one perfect. The tray was heavy. Elena's injured ankle throbbed as she carried it through the house toward the garden. She was so focused on not spilling that she didn't see Daniel's gaming controller cord stretched across the hallway. Her foot caught the cord. Time seemed to slow down. Elena felt herself falling forward. The tray tilted. 12 crystal glasses, each one costing more than Elena made in a month, flew through the air. The sound of shattering crystal was deafening. Elena hit the marble floor hard, landing in a pool of water and broken glass. Pain shot through her hands as shards cut into her palms. "What was that?" Margaret's voice echoed from the garden. Elena scrambled to her knees, blood dripping from her hands, trying desperately to pick up the pieces. Margaret appeared in the doorway, her face red with rage. Behind her, all 12 party guests crowded to see what happened. "You stupid, clumsy idiot!" Margaret screamed. "Those glasses were irreplaceable." "I'm so sorry, ma'am. I tripped. I don't care what you tripped on. Do you have any idea what those cost?" Margaret grabbed Elena by her arm, yanking her up. Elena cried out as glass embedded in her knees dug deeper. "Ma'am, please, I'm bleeding. I don't care if you're dying. You've ruined everything." Margaret's hand flew across Elena's face. The slap echoed through the hallway. The party guests gasped. A few looked uncomfortable, but no one intervened. "Margaret, perhaps we should," Patricia began. "Stay out of this," Margaret snapped. She turned back to Elena. "Get out of my sight. Clean up this mess. And you won't eat for the next 3 days. Maybe that will teach you to be more careful." 3 days? Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "Ma'am, please, I haven't eaten properly in." "I said get out." Elena limped away, her hands and knees bleeding, her face stinging from the slap. Behind her, she heard Margaret's voice smoothing over, making excuses to her guests. "I apologize for that scene. Good help is so hard to find these days." The women's laughter followed Elena down the hallway. In the kitchen, Elena washed the blood from her hands and knees, crying silently. She picked glass shards from her skin with trembling fingers. Some pieces were too deep. She needed tweezers. But there were no tweezers. No first aid kit. Nothing. She wrapped her hands in dish towels and got the broom and dustpan. For the next hour, she cleaned up the broken crystal while the party continued in the garden, the women's laughter drifting through the windows. That night, alone in her basement room, Elena unwrapped her hands. The cuts were infected, red and angry. Her stomach cramped with hunger. She hadn't eaten in 2 days already, and now 3 more days stretched ahead. She pulled out her phone, her only connection to the outside world, and stared at it. She could call someone. The police. A shelter. Anyone. But who would believe her? Margaret Hayes was respected, wealthy, connected. Elena was nobody, an orphan with no family, no money, no proof of the abuse. The phone slipped from her fingers. "Mom, Dad," she whispered to the photo on her table. "I don't think I'm going to make it out of here." Outside her small window, storm clouds gathered. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Something was building, not just in the weather, but in the house itself. Years of cruelty, decades of Margaret Hayes hurting people who couldn't fight back. All of it was accumulating like pressure in a sealed container. Eventually, something would break. Someone would break. The question was, who would break first? Day 1 without food. Elena completed her tasks, running on nothing but water. Her hands throbbed with infection, but she wrapped them in clean rags and kept working. Hunger was a constant companion now, no longer shocking, but simply part of her existence. Day 2. Elena's vision blurred while scrubbing the bathroom floors. She had to stop every few minutes to keep from fainting. When Margaret walked past and saw her resting, she kicked the bucket of cleaning solution, splashing it across the floor Elena had just cleaned. Start over. And faster this time. Day 3. Elena could barely climb the stairs from her basement room. Each step felt like a mountain. Her body was consuming itself, burning through the last reserves of energy. Her thoughts became foggy, disconnected. She made breakfast for Margaret and Daniel. The smell of bacon tortured to her empty stomach. Her hands shook so badly that she spilled coffee on the counter. "You're pathetic," Daniel said, not looking up from his phone. "Mom should just fire you." "I should," Margaret agreed. "But then I'd have to train someone new. At least you know how things should be done, even if you can't execute properly." On the 4th day, Elena woke up and couldn't remember where she was. The basement room spun around her. She tried to stand, but collapsed immediately. "Get up," she told herself. "You have to get up." But her body wouldn't obey. She lay on the cold concrete floor, drifting in and out of consciousness. Hours passed. No one came to check on her. Finally, around noon, she heard footsteps on the stairs. "Elena, where are you? The kitchen is a disaster." Margaret appeared in the doorway of the basement room. She looked at Elena, crumpled on the floor with complete indifference. "Get up. I don't have time for your dramatics." "I can't," Elena whispered. "Please help me. You can and you will. Get upstairs right now, or you're fired. And good luck finding another job without a reference." Margaret turned and left. Elena lay there, tears streaming down her face. In her delirium, she saw her mother standing in the corner of the room, smiling sadly. "Not yet, Mija," her mother's voice seemed to say. "Get up one more time, just once more." Using every ounce of willpower, Elena pulled herself to her knees, then to her feet. She leaned against the wall, waiting for the room to stop spinning. Then she climbed the stairs, one agonizing step at a time. In the kitchen, dirty dishes were piled everywhere. Margaret and Daniel had thrown a fit, apparently, dumping drawers and cabinets just to make more work. Elena stood at the sink, washing dishes, her vision going dark around the edges. "I'm dying," she realized with strange calm. This is what dying feels like. She was washing one of Margaret's expensive plates. White porcelain with gold trim, hand-painted flowers around the edge. Her hands were so weak, so numb. The plate slipped. It hit the floor and shattered into a dozen pieces. Elena stared at it, too exhausted even to feel afraid. What was that? Margaret's footsteps thundered through the house. She burst into the kitchen and saw the broken plate, her face transforming into something monstrous. "You broke my grandmother's plate. That was an antique. Irreplaceable." "I'm sorry," Elena said, but the words came out slurred. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry?" "Sorry." Margaret grabbed a wooden spoon from the counter and brought it down across Elena's shoulders. Elena didn't even feel it. "You worthless piece of garbage. Another strike. I gave you a home. Another. I gave you a job. Another. And this is how you repay me?" Elena slid down the cabinet and sat on the floor among the broken porcelain. She looked up at Margaret with eyes that no longer held fear, only emptiness. "You're not even crying," Margaret said, disgusted. "Get out of my sight. Go to your room and don't come out until I say so." Elena crawled to the basement stairs. She couldn't walk anymore. She pulled herself down step by step, her body leaving a trail of blood from her reopened hand wounds. In her small room, she collapsed on the bed. Her silver cross necklace, her mother's last gift, pressed against her chest. She clutched it with her bandaged hands. "Please, God," she whispered. "I try to be good. I try to be strong. But I can't anymore. I just can't." Her fever had returned, worse than before. Her body shook with chills despite the warm summer evening. She pulled the thin blanket around her shoulders and closed her eyes. Outside, night fell over the Hayes estate. The mansion's windows glowed with warm light. Inside, Margaret and Daniel ate dinner, laughing at something on TV. In the basement, Elena Martinez took slow, shallow breaths. Her heart beat sluggishly, struggling to pump blood through her starved body. She thought of her parents. She thought of their little apartment filled with love and laughter. She thought of Sunday dinners and her mother's songs and her father's terrible jokes. "I'll see you soon," she whispered. At 11:47 p.m., Elena's breathing stopped. Her fingers released the silver cross. The young woman who had survived losing everything, who had endured months of cruelty and abuse, who had worked until her body gave out. She was gone. The basement room fell silent, but something else stirred in that silence. Something that remembered every insult, every blow, every moment of suffering. Elena Martinez was dead, but her story wasn't over. Not even close. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows of the Hayes estate. Margaret sat at the dining table, scrolling through her phone, annoyed that her coffee wasn't ready. "Where's that girl?" she muttered. "Elena. Elena." No response. "Lazy as always," Margaret said to Daniel, who was eating cereal straight from the box. "Go down and tell her to get up here." "Why don't you go?" Daniel whined. "Because I'm not going to that disgusting basement." "Go. Now." Daniel groaned, but shuffled to the basement door. He clomped down the stairs, calling out, "Hey, Mom wants you. Stop being lazy." He pushed open Elena's door. The girl lay on her bed, completely still, her skin gray in the dim light. Her eyes were half open, staring at nothing. Her hands were still clutched around something at her chest, a silver cross necklace. Elena." Daniel stepped closer. "This isn't funny. Get up." He touched her arm. It was cold. "Oh, God. Oh, God." Daniel stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet. "Mom. Something's wrong." Margaret came to the top of the stairs. "What are you screaming about?" I think she's dead." "Don't be ridiculous." But Margaret's voice wavered. She descended the stairs slowly, her designer heels clicking on concrete. She saw Elena's body and stopped cold. For a long moment, Margaret just stared. Then she stepped closer, pressed 2 fingers against Elena's neck, checking for a pulse she knew she wouldn't find. Nothing. Margaret pulled her hand back quickly, as if the body might contaminate her. "She's dead," Margaret whispered. Then louder, "She's actually dead." "What do we do?" Daniel's voice cracked with panic. "Should we call 911? Margaret's mind raced. An ambulance. Police. Questions. An investigation into how a 19-year-old girl died in her home. People would ask about Elena's working conditions, her health, how she was treated. Margaret thought about the garden party witnesses, the broken crystal, the 3 days without food. "We need to think carefully," Margaret said slowly. "Think, Mom, she's dead. We have to call someone." "And tell them what? That our housekeeper died in her sleep?" "There will be questions, Daniel. Investigations. They'll blame us." "But we didn't." Daniel stopped. They both knew what they'd done. "Call Dr. Morrison," Margaret said finally. "Tell him it's an emergency, but be discreet. He owes me favors." Dr. Morrison arrived an hour later. He was Margaret's personal physician, a man who'd learned long ago that asking too many questions would cost him his wealthiest client. He examined Elena's body with professional detachment, noting the signs of malnutrition, dehydration, infected wounds, and ultimately organ failure. "How long has you been like this?" he asked. "Like what?" Margaret's voice was sharp. "Malnourished. These injuries on her hands, they're badly infected. This girl needed medical attention days ago. Maybe weeks ago. She never said anything." Margaret lied smoothly. "She seemed fine yesterday." Dr. Morrison looked at Margaret for a long moment. They both knew she was lying. But he also knew his mortgage payment came from patients like Margaret Hayes. "I'll write up the death certificate," he said quietly. "Natural causes. Heart failure due to an underlying condition." But Margaret, this girl was severely malnourished. "If anyone asks questions." "No one will ask questions," Margaret interrupted. "She was an orphan. No family. No friends. Nobody even knows she exists." "What about the funeral?" "I'll handle it." Quietly, Dr. Morrison packed his bag and left without another word. Margaret hired a budget funeral home that asked no questions. They came that afternoon, removed Elena's body, and took her to a cemetery on the edge of town, the kind of place where people with no money and no family ended up. The funeral was 2 days later. Margaret didn't attend. Neither did Daniel. The only people there were the funeral director and two gravediggers who barely glanced at the simple pine coffin as they lowered it into the ground. No flowers, no prayers, no mourners. Elena Martinez was buried in an unmarked grave, as if she'd never existed at all. Back at the mansion, Margaret scrubbed down Elena's basement room with bleach, erasing every trace of the girl who died there. She threw away Elena's few belongings, her clothes, her photo of her parents, her silver cross necklace. "It's done," Margaret told Daniel that evening. "We never speak of this again. To anyone. Understand?" "Yeah, I understand." But that night, neither of them could sleep. Margaret lay in her expensive bed, staring at the ceiling. She kept seeing Elena's face, not dead, but alive, looking at her with those sad, trusting eyes. She was just a servant, Margaret whispered to herself. She was nothing, but the words felt hollow. Around midnight, Margaret heard something. Footsteps in the hallway outside her room. Slow, deliberate footsteps. She sat up. "Daniel? Is that you?" The footsteps stopped outside her door. "Daniel?" No answer. Margaret got up and opened her door. The hallway was empty, but the air felt cold, impossibly cold for a summer night. "I'm just tired," she told herself. "It's been a stressful few days." She closed the door and went back to bed, pulling the covers tight around her. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. Something in the dark corners of her room, in the shadows that seemed deeper than they should be. Miles away, in the pauper section of Riverside Cemetery, fresh dirt covered Elena's grave. The wind picked up, rustling through the trees. The earth over the grave trembled slightly. Deep below, in the darkness, something stirred. Elena Martinez had died alone, forgotten, unmourned. But death wasn't the end. For some souls, souls that die with unfinished business, with justice unserved, with wrongs unavenged, death is just the beginning. The house on Riverside Drive held its breath. Something was coming home. 3 days after Elena's burial, Margaret posted a job listing for a new housekeeper. She needed someone immediately. The house was a mess, and she refused to clean it herself. Within a week, a young woman named Sarah Chun responded to the ad. She was 23, a recent college graduate struggling to find work in her field. The housekeeping job wasn't ideal, but it offered room, board, and a salary while she looked for something better. "You have experience?" Margaret asked during the interview, looking Sarah up and down. "Yes, ma'am. I worked my way through college cleaning houses and offices. The position is demanding. Long hours. High standards. Can you handle that?" Sarah needed this job desperately. Her student loans were crushing her. "Yes, ma'am. I'm a hard worker." "Fine. You start tomorrow. Your room is in the basement." Margaret led Sarah down to the small concrete room. Sarah tried to hide her disappointment at the bare space, the single bulb, the lack of windows. "It's cozy," Sarah said, forcing a smile. "It's adequate for the help," Margaret replied coldly. "Be upstairs at 6 a.m. sharp." That night, Sarah unpacked her things in the basement room. The space felt strange, cold despite the summer heat, and there was an odd smell she couldn't identify, like bleach mixed with something else. She hung up her clothes, set up her laptop, and placed a photo of her family on the small dresser. As she arranged her belongings, she felt an odd sensation, like she was being watched. Sarah turned around. The room was empty. "Too many horror movies," she muttered to herself. She climbed into bed around 11 p.m., exhausted from moving her things. Sleep came quickly. At 2:17 a.m., Sarah woke suddenly. The room was freezing. Her breath came out in visible puffs, though moments ago it had been warm. A figure stood at the foot of her bed. Sarah's scream caught in her throat. The figure was a young woman in a gray housekeeping uniform, her skin pale and translucent, glowing with a soft, otherworldly light. "Please," Sarah whispered, "please don't hurt me." The ghostly figure tilted her head, studying Sarah with dark, sad eyes. When she spoke, her voice was soft, like wind through leaves. "I won't hurt you. I'm Elena." "Elena? Who? What are you?" "I was the housekeeper before you. I died in this room." Elena gestured around the small space. "The woman upstairs, Margaret Hayes, she starved me, beat me, Work me until my body gave out. Sarah's heart pounded. This is a dream. I'm dreaming. You're not dreaming, Sarah. I know this is frightening, but I need your help. Margaret can't keep doing this. She can't keep hurting people. Why me? Why are you telling me this? Elena moved closer, her form flickering like a candle flame. Because you're kind. I can see it in you. And because you're in danger. Margaret will treat you the same way she treated me if you stay here. Then I'll leave. I'll leave right now. If you leave, she'll just hire someone else. Another victim. This has to end. Elena's eyes grew brighter, more intense. Help me, Sarah. Help me make her understand what she's done. How? How can I possibly help a ghost? I'll show you. But first, you need to know everything. You need to see what she did. Elena reached out her translucent hand. This won't hurt. Trust me. Sarah hesitated, then slowly extended her own hand. When their fingers touched, Sarah's vision exploded with images. She saw everything. Elena's arrival, the months of abuse, the beatings, the starvation, the final agonizing days. She felt Elena's pain, her fear, her desperate hope that someone would help. And she felt the moment of death, the slow, cold fading of everything. Sarah gasped and pulled her hand back, tears streaming down her face. Oh my God! Oh my God! You suffered so much. Now you understand, Elena said. Will you help me? Sarah wiped her tears and nodded. Yes. Tell me what to do. For now, just survive. I'll protect you. When she tries to hurt you, I'll be there. And slowly, we'll show her the truth. We'll make her feel everything I felt. What if she tries to do to me what she did to you? Elena's form brightened, and for the first time, she smiled. A fierce, determined smile. She won't get the chance. I'm here now, and I'm done being the victim. The ghost's form began to fade. Sleep, Sarah. You have a long day tomorrow. But remember, you're not alone anymore. Elena vanished, leaving Sarah sitting up in bed, her mind reeling. She looked at her phone. 2:34 a.m. Had that really happened? She looked down at her hand, the one that had touched Elena's spirit. Her fingers tingled with residual cold. It had happened. Sarah lay back down, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow she would work for a woman who'd murdered her previous employee through abuse and neglect. A woman who felt no remorse, no guilt, nothing. But she wouldn't face Margaret alone. A ghost was on her side, a spirit seeking justice. Sarah closed her eyes, and somehow, impossibly, she felt safe. In the darkness of the basement, Elena's presence lingered like morning mist. Watching, waiting, planning. Upstairs, Margaret Hayes slept soundly, unaware that her world was about to crumble, unaware that the girl she'd killed had come back. And this time, Elena wasn't afraid anymore. Sarah's first morning started exactly as Elena's had, a 5 a.m. alarm, exhaustion, and immediate demands. But there was one crucial difference. As Sarah stood in the kitchen, trying to remember how Margaret liked her coffee, she felt a gentle presence beside her. 2 sugars, no cream, Elena's voice whispered. And she wants the eggs exactly 4 minutes. Not 3, not 5. Sarah glanced around. She couldn't see Elena, but she could feel her, a cool comfort in the air. Thank you, Sarah whispered back. Breakfast was perfect. Margaret ate in suspicious silence, clearly expecting mistakes. When she found none, she looked almost disappointed. The bathroom needs cleaning. All 5 of them. And do the laundry. Make sure you separate the delicates. Yes, ma'am. But as Sarah worked, she noticed something strange. The tasks were somehow easier. When she scrubbed the bathroom tile, the grime seemed to come off with half the usual effort. The laundry sorted itself into neat piles while she wasn't looking. The vacuum seemed to glide across the floors as if powered by invisible hands. Elena was helping her. By noon, Sarah had completed work that should have taken until evening. She stood in the kitchen, amazed. Margaret appeared in the doorway, her eyes narrowed. How did you finish so quickly? I'm efficient, ma'am. Suspiciously efficient. Margaret inspected the bathroom, looking for any excuse to criticize. Everything was spotless. Fine. Make lunch. I want a Caesar salad with grilled chicken. Sarah prepared the meal carefully. As she plated it, Elena's voice whispered again, "Wait." Sarah paused, confused. Then she watched in amazement as the salad on the plate began to change. The fresh lettuce wilted. The chicken turned gray. The whole dish transformed into something that looked rotten and spoiled. Sarah quickly made another salad and brought both to the dining room. One normal, one mysteriously ruined. "Ma'am, I made your salad twice. The first one, something strange happened to it." Margaret looked at the spoiled salad with disgust, then at the fresh one. "What kind of incompetence is this? Did you leave out?" "No, ma'am. I made it just now. I don't understand what happened." Margaret pushed both plates away. "Just bring me a sandwich. And try not to ruin that, too." That night, after Sarah went to bed, the real haunting began. Margaret was in her bedroom, brushing her hair at her vanity mirror. She just applied her expensive night cream when she noticed something odd in the reflection. Behind her, in the mirror, stood a figure. Margaret spun around. The room was empty. She turned back to the mirror. The figure was still there, a young woman in a gray uniform, her face sad and hollow. "Who?" Margaret's voice caught. "What?" Elena's reflection stared back at her. Then she spoke, her voice echoing strangely. "You killed me." Margaret screamed and threw her hairbrush at the mirror. It hit the glass but didn't break. When she looked again, the reflection showed only herself, pale, frightened, her carefully maintained composure shattered. "I'm losing my mind," Margaret whispered. "It's stress. Just stress." But the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Margaret's breath came out in frosty clouds. The lights flickered, and then she heard it. Footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate, coming closer to her door. Margaret ran to the door and locked it, her hands shaking. "Daniel! Daniel!" The footsteps stopped outside her door. Margaret backed away, staring at the handle. It began to turn, slowly, testing the lock. Then everything stopped. The temperature returned to normal. The lights steadied, but Margaret couldn't stop shaking. Down the hall, Daniel was having his own experience. He'd fallen asleep playing video games when his TV suddenly shut off. Then it turned back on, but instead of his game, the screen showed static. A face emerged from the static. Elena's face. "You watched her hurt me," the image said. "You did nothing." "This isn't real," Daniel muttered, grabbing for the remote. But the TV wouldn't respond to the buttons. "You laughed when she fell. You called her worthless. You're just like your mother." "Shut up. Shut up." Daniel threw the remote at the TV. The screen cracked, but Elena's face remained, now distorted through the broken glass, making her look even more horrifying. "You could have helped me. One phone call. One moment of courage. But you're a coward." The TV exploded in a shower of sparks and broken glass. Daniel scrambled backward, falling off his bed. When he looked again, the TV was intact. No cracks, no damage. But the message was clear. Elena was here, and she hadn't forgotten. The next morning, Margaret came downstairs looking haggard. She'd barely slept, jumping at every sound, seeing shadows that moved wrong. "Did you hear anything strange last night?" she asked Daniel. "Like what?" "Never mind." Margaret didn't want to admit what she'd experienced. But over breakfast, things got worse. Margaret cut into her omelet, and blood poured out. Actual blood pooling on her plate. She screamed and pushed the plate away. It fell to the floor and shattered, but when Sarah came running to clean it up, there was no blood. Just normal eggs. "Did you see that?" Margaret demanded. "See what, ma'am?" "The blood." There was blood. Sarah looked at her with genuine concern. "Ma'am, there's no blood. Are you feeling all right?" Margaret stared at the broken plate. Had she imagined it? That afternoon, Margaret tried to take a nap, exhausted from lack of sleep. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Elena's face. When she opened them, shadows moved in the corners of her room. She heard whispers in empty hallways, felt cold hands brush her shoulders, saw glimpses of a gray uniform disappearing around corners. By evening, Margaret was unraveling. "I need to get out of this house," she told Daniel. "We're going to a hotel tonight." They packed bags and headed for the car. But when Margaret turned the key, the engine roared to life, then immediately died. She tried again. Nothing. The car was dead. They called for a taxi. It never arrived. They were trapped. That night, As Margaret lay in her bed with all the lights on, Elena appeared at the foot of the bed. Not in a mirror, not as a reflection, but there, solid and real. "This is only the beginning," Elena said. "You need to understand what you did to me. And you will. I promise you will." Margaret opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Elena smiled, a cold, sad smile, and vanished. Margaret finally found her voice and screamed into the empty room. Down in the basement, Sarah heard the scream and smiled. Justice was coming. Slowly, methodically, painfully. Elena Martinez was back from the dead, and she had all the time in the world. 1 week had passed since the haunting began, and Margaret Hayes was a shadow of her former self. She couldn't eat. Every meal turned to ash in her mouth, or worse. The smell of Elena's unwashed wounds, the taste of starvation. She was experiencing everything Elena had felt. She couldn't sleep. Nightmares plagued her every time she closed her eyes. She dreamed of falling downstairs, of working until her hands bled, of hunger so intense it consumed her from the inside. She couldn't find peace anywhere in her own home. The mansion that had been her pride, her status symbol, had become a prison. Margaret tried everything. She called in a priest to bless the house. The holy water boiled when it touched the floors. The priest left, pale and shaken, refusing to return. She hired paranormal investigators. Their equipment went haywire, recording voices that whispered, "Murderer, child killer, monster." The investigators packed up and fled before finishing their investigation. She even tried moving to a hotel, but Elena's presence followed her. The hotel room turned ice cold. The TV showed only Elena's face, no matter what channel she selected. Margaret lasted 2 hours before running back home. There was no escape. Meanwhile, Sarah watched it all unfold with a mixture of pity and satisfaction. She continued her work, but under Elena's protection, Margaret couldn't mistreat her. Every time Margaret raised her voice to Sarah, doors would slam. When she tried to deny Sarah food, Margaret's own meals would vanish from her plate. When she attempted to impose impossible tasks, the work would complete itself overnight. Margaret was losing control of everything, including her mind. One morning, Margaret came downstairs to find her expensive wardrobe in shreds. Every designer dress, every piece of imported silk, torn to ribbons and scattered across her bedroom floor. "And oh," she screamed, "not my clothes, not my beautiful clothes." Elena appeared in the doorway, fully visible now, no longer hiding. "You cared more about your clothes than my life," Elena said simply. "You're dead. You're supposed to be dead." "I am dead. You killed me. Remember?" Elena stepped closer. "You starved me, beat me, worked me until I collapsed. And when I died, you threw me away like garbage. I never meant for you to die. But you didn't care if I lived. That's the same thing." Margaret collapsed on her bed, surrounded by torn fabric. "What do you want from me? What will make you leave? I want you to understand. To really understand what you did. Understand. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." "No." Elena's form grew brighter, more intense. "You're not sorry. You're scared. There's a difference." That night, Elena made her final move. Margaret lay in bed, trembling when she felt a weight on her chest. Her body began to feel strange, weak, feverish, empty. She tried to move, but couldn't. She was paralyzed, experiencing everything Elena had felt in her final days. The crushing hunger, the bone-deep exhaustion, the fever that burned through her brain, the desperation of knowing she was dying and no one cared. Hours passed like days. Margaret experienced every moment of Elena's final week. The falls, the beatings, the denial of food, the infected wounds, the desperate prayers that went unanswered. And finally, she felt the moment of death. The slow shutting down of her body, the cold creeping in, the last rattling breath. Margaret gasped and sat up, her heart hammering. She was drenched in sweat, shaking uncontrollably. "Do you understand now?" Elena stood beside the bed. Margaret looked at her with new eyes, eyes that had seen true suffering. For the first time, genuine tears rolled down her face. "I understand," she whispered. "I understand what I did to you. The pain, the fear, the loneliness. I'm so sorry, Elena. I'm so sorry. But Elena shook her head. It's too late for sorry. Sorry doesn't bring me back. Sorry doesn't erase what you did. Then what? What do you want? I want justice. And I want to make sure you never hurt anyone else again. The next morning, Sarah found Margaret in the kitchen, writing. Her hand moved frantically across paper, filling page after page. Ma'am, are you all right? Margaret looked up. Her face was gaunt, age a decade and a week. I'm writing a confession. Everything I did to Elena. Everything I've done to others over the years. All the people I've hurt. Sarah's eyes widened. Why? Because it's the truth. Because I deserve to be punished. And because... Margaret's voice broke. Because maybe if I confess, if I face consequences, her spirit will finally rest. She finished writing and signed her name. 15 pages detailing years of abuse. Not just Elena, but previous employees, business partners, anyone she'd ever had power over. Take this to the police, Margaret said, handing the pages to Sarah. Tell them everything. Are you sure? I'm sure. I can't live like this anymore. Haunted. Guilty. Knowing what I've done. Sarah took the confession. What about your son? They both looked up as Daniel appeared in the doorway. He'd aged 2, dark circles under his eyes, his usual swagger gone. I'll write my own confession, Daniel said quietly. I watched it happen. I'm guilty too. Over the next few days, everything unraveled for the Hayes family. The police investigated. The confessions were detailed and damning. Margaret was arrested for criminally negligent homicide, abuse, and a dozen other charges. Daniel faced lesser charges as an accomplice. The local news covered the story extensively. Wealthy socialite arrested in death of young housekeeper. Elena's body was exhumed from the pauper's grave and given a proper funeral. The city paid for it. A small casket covered in white flowers, a headstone with her name and dates, and a service attended by dozens of domestic workers who'd heard her story and came to pay respects. Sarah attended the funeral, crying for the girl she'd never met but felt she knew intimately. As the casket was lowered into a proper grave in a beautiful part of the cemetery, Sarah felt a presence beside her. Thank you, Elena's voice whispered. Thank you for helping me. Will you rest now? Sarah asked quietly. Yes. Justice has been served. I can let go. I'm sorry this happened to you. Me too. But maybe my story will help others. Maybe other people like Margaret will think twice. Maybe other workers will speak up sooner. Sarah felt warmth despite the cool autumn air. Elena's presence was fading, becoming lighter, more peaceful. Goodbye, Sarah. Be kind. Always be kind. I will. I promise. And then Elena was gone, truly gone this time. No cold spots, no whispers, no ghostly presence. Just peace. Sarah walked away from the funeral, her heart heavy but hopeful. Elena's story had ended, but the lesson remained. Cruelty never goes unpunished. Justice always finds a way. And even in death, the powerless can become powerful. 6 months after Margaret Hayes' arrest, the trial concluded. The courtroom was packed. Domestic workers, advocates, journalists, and curious citizens filled every seat. The case had become a rallying point for labor rights, shining a spotlight on the abuse many household employees suffered in silence. Margaret sat at the defense table, barely recognizable. Prison had stripped away her polished exterior. Her hair, once perfectly colored and styled, showed gray roots. Her designer clothes had been replaced with an orange jumpsuit. Her face was hollow, haunted. The prosecutor presented the evidence. Margaret's own confession, testimony from previous employees who'd suffered under her employ, medical records showing Elena's malnutrition and injuries, and statement from neighbors who'd witnessed the abuse. Dr. Morrison, the physician who'd falsified Elena's death certificate, had also been charged. He testified against Margaret in exchange for a lighter sentence, describing how she'd pressured him to hide the truth. When Margaret took the stand, she didn't try to defend herself. I did everything they say I did, she stated clearly. I abused Elena Martinez. I starved her, beat her, worked her to death. And when she died, I tried to cover it up. The courtroom gasped at her blunt admission. Why? The prosecutor asked. Why did you treat her that way? Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Because I could. Because she had no power and I had all of it. Because I convinced myself she was less than human. Just a servant, just the help. But she wasn't. She was a person. A child, really. And I killed her. Tears rolled down Margaret's face. Real tears, born of genuine remorse. I can't bring her back. I can't undo what I did. But I can accept my punishment. I deserve whatever this court decides. The judge sentenced Margaret to 15 years in prison for criminally negligent homicide, abuse, and conspiracy to conceal a death. Daniel received 3 years for being an accessory and failing to report the abuse. As the bailiffs led Margaret away, she looked one last time at the crowded courtroom. Among the faces, she could have sworn she saw Elena, just for a moment, nodding with quiet satisfaction before vanishing. The Hayes estate was seized by the state and sold at auction. The proceeds went to establishing the Elena Martinez Foundation, an organization dedicated to protecting domestic workers' rights, providing legal assistance to abused employees, and offering emergency housing for workers fleeing dangerous situations. Sarah Chun became the foundation's first director. She'd found her calling, fighting for people like Elena, making sure no one else suffered in silence. On the 1-year anniversary of Elena's death, the foundation held a memorial service at Riverside Cemetery. Hundreds attended, domestic workers, activists, families who'd lost loved ones to similar abuse. Elena's grave, once unmarked, now bore a beautiful headstone. Elena Martinez, 2005 to 2024. She died alone, but her voice echoes forever. Sarah placed white roses on the grave and spoke to the assembled crowd. Elena Martinez was 19 years old when she died. She was an orphan, alone in the world, just trying to survive. She worked hard, stayed kind, and never complained, even when she was being destroyed. Sarah's voice strengthened. Her death was a tragedy, but her story became a catalyst. Because of Elena, laws have changed. Because of Elena, workers have new protections. Because of Elena, abusers are being held accountable. She looked at the faces in the crowd, young women and men who worked in homes across the city, many of whom had their own stories of mistreatment. Elena's spirit fought back. She refused to be forgotten. And now we carry her fight forward. Every time we speak up against abuse, every time we demand respect, every time we protect each other, that's Elena's legacy. The crowd applauded, many crying openly. After the service, as people placed flowers and candles around Elena's grave, Sarah stood alone for a moment. "I hope you're at peace," she whispered. "We're going to make sure your death meant something. That's my promise to you." A warm breeze stirred the air, carrying the scent of flowers. Sarah felt it like a gentle embrace. Somewhere, somehow, Elena was at peace. Epilogue. 3 years later, Sarah visited Margaret Hayes in prison. The once proud socialite looked older than her years, her face lined with regret. "Why did you come?" Margaret asked, sitting across from Sarah in the visiting room. "I wanted to see if you're really sorry, if you've really changed." Margaret nodded slowly. "I am. I think about Elena every day, about what I did, about who I was. And who are you now? Someone trying to be better. I volunteer in the prison library. I tutor other inmates. I wrote a memoir, donating all proceeds to the foundation. I can't undo the past, but I can try to make the future better." Sarah studied her carefully. The woman before her bore little resemblance to the monster who'd killed Elena. Prison, guilt, and Elena's haunting had broken and remade her into something different. "Elena would want me to forgive you," Sarah said finally. She was kind, even at the end. "But forgiveness is earned, Margaret. Keep working on it." "I will, for the rest of my life." Sarah left the prison and drove to the cemetery. She did this every few months, sitting by Elena's grave, updating her on the foundation's work. "We helped 23 workers escape abusive situations this year," Sarah said to the headstone. "We got 5 employers arrested. We pushed through new legislation protecting live-in staff. You be proud." The sun was setting, casting golden light across the cemetery. Sarah stood to leave, then paused. On Elena's headstone, someone had left a single white rose. But Sarah was the only one who'd been there. She smiled, touched the cool marble, and walked away. Behind her, if she'd turned, she might have seen a shimmer in the air, like heat waves but gentler. A presence watching over the grave, satisfied with how the story had ended. Elena Martinez had been beaten, starved, and killed. But her spirit had fought back, seeking not revenge, but justice. She'd changed laws. She'd saved lives. She'd made people listen. And in the end, she'd found peace. Her story would be told for generations. A cautionary tale about cruelty, a testament to resilience, and a reminder that even the powerless have power, even in death, especially in death, because some spirits refuse to be silenced. Some stories demand to be told, and some justice cannot be denied. Elena Martinez's legacy lived on, and it always would. The end. Final YouTube CTA. Thank you so much for watching this entire series. If this story moved you, please like this video and share with others. Subscribe to this channel for more powerful stories. Most importantly, if you or someone you know is being abused, speak up. Organizations like the National Domestic Workers Alliance can help. Elena's story reminds us that silence protects abusers, but speaking up saves lives. Leave your final thoughts in the comments. What did you learn from Elena's story? Until next time, be kind to each other. Goodbye.